This is Karen Atwood, Director of Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Northeastern Iowa here in Waterloo. In an effort to bring more information to the public, we at Consumer Credit present 2 credit education programs each month on KBBG Radio. They're on the first and third Tuesdays of each month from 10:30 to 11 a.m. and repeated again at 7:30 in the evening. It's a call-in program, so feel free to call 234-1441. Let me start by thanking Lou, Bev, and the KBBG team for allowing us this opportunity to be with you to help answer your credit and debt questions. We all start out figuring if we have enough money, we can manage. We won't run into any problems that will be overwhelming. And then along comes life and hits you in the nose, or cheek, or wherever is least comfortable. And we find out what living is truly about. So today we're going to be talking about the end of your debt, bankruptcy, the legal way to end it. And we want to get your questions, answer your questions. With me is Cindy Stendeford, a certified credit counselor at Consumer Credit. Cindy deals with bankruptcy, either pre-filing counseling or pre-discharge. And that's one thing that you need to know right off the bat. Your attorney may tell you, go get some education and then come back and we'll file. But that's not what happens. You go for pre-filing counseling, see your attorney, then you come back for pre-discharge education. First off, years ago, before the bankruptcy law changed, way back when, some of you would say the dark ages, the only bankruptcies we ever heard about were really big bankruptcies. They were corporate ones like J.C. Penney's. They were ones where the company had a plan. Once they filed bankruptcy, they wouldn't have the debt and they could move forward. Because bankruptcy was not an end of debt, but bankruptcy was a new beginning. That is still what it should be for you today. You should not just file bankruptcy to get rid of the debts and the phone calls. You can get rid of phone calls by changing your number. A much better way is to file when you have a future plan all set. This debt is not there, you've got a plan. That is what you need to do. So Cindy, why don't you give us an idea of when the people come to see you, what are you looking at?
Well, technically, we always start out our interviews by asking what situation actually brought them to the point where they feel that bankruptcy is the only answer. Some of the warning signs that you are headed for serious financial trouble is that your credit card balances are growing each month, you're taking cash advances on one credit card to pay another, you may be getting calls and letters notifying that your payments are past due. Some people even hide their mail or stop opening it because they fear the balances on their credit card statements. So if you're spending more money than you're bringing in, you need to determine the root cause of the problem itself and then face that situation head on so that you can determine the underlying cause of that problem. So we want to find out basically, what happened. Was it medical? Was it a loss of income? Separation from a job, or when their partner lost their job? Is it like a divorce situation? Something of that nature. And then we always go through their existing budget, what they spend on necessities each month.
Honesty is the most important thing here, because if you prepare a budget based on just what you think or maybe or without this or that taken into consideration, you're in trouble. And don't hide the debt. If you're a married couple or a live-in situation, either way, let the other person in the household know what your debt is and what your plan to get rid of it is. That is the most important thing. Sometimes people feel that bankruptcy is the answer, when actually it could be handled differently. However, the longer they let it go, the less the chance is of repaying the debt and handling it in another way than bankruptcy.
You do need to consider before you file, because filing is or should be the last alternative. What are you willing to do in order to get through the crisis that, you're in right at the moment? First and foremost, take an inventory of where you are. List any and all of your debts. Once you've acknowledged the cause of your financial difficulty and you've made a detailed list of your outstanding debt, you need to review your budget and ask yourself the following questions. What areas can I cut? Can I reduce my spending and or get a second job so that I will have more money to pay off my debts? And do I have any assets to sell? So many people don't even consider those steps before they actually say, oh, I gotta file bankruptcy. I'm just overloaded.
And selling an asset might seem desperate right now, but once you file bankruptcy, it's on your record for 10 years. A guy came in to see me a number of years ago. He was quite upset. He filed, but it was turned down. So every bankruptcy filed isn't necessarily going to be discharged. His was filed, it was not discharged, so he still had the debt, but it's on his record for the next 7 years. So he couldn't buy a house, he couldn't get a car, he had all of the problems from the bankruptcy. But he should have met with somebody and found out what needed to be done. I was at a public hearing, and in another situation, a couple tried to hide the fact that the husband had a Harley. They filed bankruptcy. They got their debt discharged. They got mad at each other. Then one of them turned in to the courts that there was a Harley Davidson involved in that bankruptcy. One went to prison and the other one got stuck with a big amount of money and probably all of the debt. You just need to be honest. And your attorney will help you to determine what to do with assets that are not going to be deemed yours after the bankruptcy. And I should have said in the very beginning, we're going to give you help to get to that legal step. We are not attorneys, and we do suggest that before you go to see an attorney about bankruptcy, you sit down and you write every question you want to ask him or her. Make sure you know the things that you need answered before you get started.
You can also look for other types of assistance too before you file. There's a lot of government assistance out there, or check with your state, county, and city to find out what services are available. And the 211 helpline is very useful from United Way. And they also have a website, www.211.org. But searching the internet can help you find many of the resources that you need, to find help.
Let's talk about medical debt for a minute. In previous years, the major reason for bankruptcy was medical debt. Today they tell us credit cards, but yet a lot of medical debt is put on credit cards, so I think it's probably still pretty much the same. But if you have medical debt, there are foundations, and the foundations periodically review and forgive medical debt. It depends upon your situation. But if you're thinking about filing bankruptcy because of medical debt, don't do so until the procedures are completed and until you're on the way back up from the problem. If you file in the midst of the problem, and some attorneys will just have you go ahead because you want it filed, and then you build debt, you're going to be in the same shape in a short period of time. So make sure that if you have medical debt, you contact foundations, Allen, Covenant, Sartori, to see what kind of foundations are those in your local town, to see what kind of foundations are available, and when they meet, what the kind of applications they have. Fill them out and get some benefit. This may keep you from having to file. You can also use the approval of one foundation to get the approval of another. And this would allow your budget to stay on track. Every one of you should have a budget that you're following, and the credit debt and the outside debt has to be extra to your budget.
Well, you are correct, though. A lot of creditors will often be willing to work with you if you call them and explain the situation, especially medical. But, now, credit cards are a little bit more trickier. There are a couple alternatives, especially if you own a home or have a good paying job. You may want to take out what they call a consolidation loan to help you get back on your feet. But before you borrow money to consolidate the debt, like you just said, you want to make sure that you're not going to end up in the exact same position you were before, with additional credit card debt once you've paid everything off. So, and if you own a home, you have the option of tapping into the equity in your home. But that decision really requires very careful consideration because, well, technically what you're doing is you're taking unsecured debt and you're making it secured debt by creating another lien against your property. And you really have to think carefully by doing that because if you can't make those mortgage payments, you have jeopardized and could lose your home.
Whereas not paying the credit card debt is not going to mean anything. It will either, I should explain too, when you have debt, let's say you don't pay a bill and it's $1,000. The company tries to collect for the first probably 90 days. If they're unsuccessful, it next goes to a collection agency. And they will try for about 90 days. Same thing with the next collection agency. You may hear from 3 different places for the same debt. And at that point, you really, it's not a good idea to be paying anybody but the main place you owe the money to. And if it's going to be money that you're just not going to pay, you just have to let it ride. So the longer it goes unpaid, the less chance they are going to continue to get it from you. It does not mean your debt is not there. Your debt is still there. The only way you get rid of that debt is through bankruptcy or the company writing it off. You can write a letter to the company and ask that they write this debt off because of this or that. Have you had any of those be successful?
No, I actually haven't.
Yeah. But it's something that you could do to see if you can get them. I had a company years ago, I called them for a final payout on a client, and the gal looked it up and she said, oh, it looks like the last $600 or $700 was interest. I'm just going to write that off to zero. And she sent us a statement that it was $0. That client was so thrilled to see that company would actually do that. So a lot of that depends upon what the company is going to do. And because they do it for one does not mean they're going to do it for another. So a lot of times it's your payment history, your attitude towards them, that determines on how they're going to respond when you ask.
And I have to say, Karen, you really, really want to think carefully before you go to like a payday loan company, a check cashing establishment, or a title loan company. It's a quick cash that comes at a very steep cost. The average interest rate on a payday loan is between 200 and 400%. So the kind of loans that you get from them, the term is typically so short that it's really difficult to repay the loan when it comes due. So if you have you feel like you have researched or, taken every option available, the one thing that you want to do is actually, before you even talk to an attorney, is to, if you're feeling overwhelmed or unable to resolve the situation, visit a professional credit counselor employed by a nonprofit counseling agency and make sure that they are certified and accredited.
The payday loan places, a lot of that is your own personal attitude towards money and your personal discipline. Payday loan is going to give you the money today so you don't have to wait till tomorrow. That's very short-sighted, but that's about as short as it is. They're going to tell you, you know, this isn't due for 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks you can pay us back. So you borrow 200 in 2 weeks, guess what? You only have 100 to pay them. So you pay them the 100, and they rewrite it for 2 weeks for the 200, and they might even say, hey, let's give you another 100. All of a sudden, you're in a 2-week cycle with them. The interest is then calculated, and you are trying to figure out how to get this done. We have seen people with as many as 9 payday loans, and every one of them is coming up in 2 weeks. Now, nobody has got the kind of salaries to pay off payday loans every 2 weeks. They just don't. So if you have the desire to do it, sit down and talk to your family and get yourself thinking about something else. Who knows, play a game of cards, talk to your aunt or your friend, but don't go to a payday loan place. I can't stress enough how that's just shortening yourself of the money that you need.
It is such a vicious cycle. And unfortunately, so many people do it. And I know you said that you've seen people with 9. My record's 16.
Oh my, that they are actually using.
Yeah, yep. And it's, you get caught in that, and it's just, and you know, your family, like your children, moms and dads, the example you set for them, how you handle your money, is how your children learn to take care of their own money as adults. So I think you came up with a really good comparison this morning about, you know, kids and the way they handle money.
Yeah, if a child is taught to eat fruits and vegetables, they probably will grow up strong. If they're given candy and sweets and pop, they'll probably be kind of heavy and not so strong. If an adult buys all of their wants and they just skip their needs, they may not be financially successful. If they handle their needs first and then their wants, they probably won't be facing bankruptcy. So see, it's a matter of knowing what's good for you. And this has to start when you're young. This can't start, it doesn't start when you're 40 or 50 or 60 years old. It's a building, and you build when you're young. And I would say too, things happen in life. We know that. I know you don't go through life and expect the best from everything and get the worst from everything and woe is me. No, that's not life. Things happen. You can have a medical issue, which all of a sudden takes a lot of good money and makes it so that you cannot work. You can be in a marriage situation where the other half takes you for all you had before you can actually discover what it is and get on your own feet. You can have started a business. You really wanted to get that business rolling. And guess what? Between the economy or the cost, your money went for that. Each one of these situations is changed by you acknowledging what the situation is and setting a plan for what you must do in order to correct it. And I will add, there is pain involved in all of it. Those kind of changes are not nice. If you set a business and it failed, you're going to feel bad about that. But you've got the debt to pay off, and you've got to start something new. 80% of the small businesses in the United States are owned by women. And it is felt that that's that high because women are willing to stick with it for a longer period of time, and they invest more of themselves into it and less of the capital. So those kind of small businesses will last. And some of them are like Tupperware or Avon there's a lot of home businesses that way. So you can start something that's not gonna cost you a lot and get a little bit of financial freedom that way. So if you do have to go into the process, let's talk about the different types of bankruptcy.
Okay, well, the two most common, basically, are a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13. Now, there are two other common chapters. One is the 11, which is, like you said, a business reorganization, and a Chapter 12, which is agricultural. And all of their guidelines are basically set up by the federal government, and they follow the same ones. Now, when you come in to see us, again, we're gonna take your budget, your monthly expenses, your debts, you know, your complete background of information, and it's never our job to tell you whether or not you can file. You know, we're not attorneys, we're not gonna give you legal advice, but we are gonna let you know from our experience if there's any other alternatives to filing, and to give you some additional information about the bankruptcy process. One of the alternatives that we would explore, obviously, is a debt management plan, where the creditors themselves will reduce their interest rates, which consequently reduces your payment and pays off your debt faster. So that is something that if you are able to, you know, we will always suggest that as an alternative for you to begin with. We have to file with the Department of Justice and tell them whether or not we believe a debt management plan is feasible for your situation. So we're going to do that. Now, the bankruptcy laws changed in October of 2005 that do require the counseling now. Again, the first thing that we also recommend to you is that you should disclose everything to your attorney. As Karen said, being honest is the utmost importance. You've got to tell them everything. And, you know, having a list of questions when you go in is obviously a good thing, but the purpose of filing is always to protect your income and your property. So the first thing the attorney is gonna do is conduct what they call a means test. And that test will determine which chapter he's gonna recommend that you file. Again, the most common one is a Chapter 7, which is a flat-out liquidating bankruptcy, and it erases all of your unsecured debt. A Chapter 13 is the second most common. That is a wage earner or a repayment plan directly through the trustee in the bankruptcy court. Now, you do repay your debts, but most often on the unsecured debt, you repay maybe a prorated portion of the debt that you owe. So you can also reduce the debt that you are paying back to the creditor by that means.
Some of the debts that are not discharged are most federal, state, and local tax, alimony and child support, student loans, some student loans, and debts you failed to disclose in your bankruptcy papers when the creditor has no knowledge of the filing. So if you would owe a credit card company and not put it in your petition and the credit card company find out about it, you're liable. However, an attorney can go in up to 7 months later and amend your petition so that it would include that. You need to remember that if it happened to you, because your attorney won't